The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and tonight for you guys, I have a fascinating Sasquatch researcher who has 30 years actively researching out in the field with a plethora of fascinating experiences, from first-hand sightings to trace evidence to a lot of other fascinating and kind of weird off-the-wall type experiences. I definitely think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did having it. But before we get into this one today, just a quick piece of news. For anybody that enjoys listening to Bizarre Inquiries, we recently updated that, and that is going to be a YouTube show specifically. The more raunchy episodes are going to be the ones that are on Patreon, but for the most part, we're going to make that one a YouTube show. And for anybody who's been paying attention to all of the encounter reports that I've been trying to collect, the Patreon exclusive show that I'm going to be working on is one called The Reality Report. And that one is going to be a bunch of your guys' group experiences, some of the more bizarre stuff that I find on the internet as far as encounters and everything goes. But if you guys want to be a part of that show, you guys want to help me so that I can create that show, if you guys don't mind reporting some encounters to ommencounterreports@outlook.com, you guys can either, one, type it out and I can read it on the show, or two, if you guys want to call and leave a voicemail or record yourself on audio and email it to me, again, you guys can do it to that email, or you guys can just call in directly, maybe even text it if you want to. The Encounters hotline, which is 313-364-1551. And if you didn't catch that number, it is also available down in the show description. So if anybody has any encounters, no matter how big, no matter how small, I would absolutely love to hear about them, and I would absolutely love to be able to feature you guys on the show. And if anybody is interested in being a guest on the show, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. And every single thing that I mention is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, Sasquatch researcher Mike Hartman. How's it going today, man?
Oh, it is going great. How are things up in your area?
Honestly, not too bad. It's starting to get a little bit chilly out, so I mean, I can't complain about that. I definitely love the cold more than the heat, and I'm kind of over the heat.
Yeah, it's been a rough summer, and fall is most welcomed right now, so...
Especially about what we're going to end up talking about today. It's perfect season for doing that kind of stuff, because summer gets a little bit too hot. I feel like you have better luck doing some Sasquatch research during the fall, honestly.
You do. Fall is... I actually think winter is the number one, but there's just less people in the woods to notice stuff. Fall number two, spring number three, and then summer comes in last place. But if I had to rate the seasons, that would be my go-to.
So I feel like even during the summer, I mean, it's hot. These things got a bunch of hair on them, so assumably they ain't doing too much moving. They're probably laying in certain spots, so it's harder to catch these things because they're not trying to do a lot of moving unless it's nighttime.
No, because like every morning I always point out to the people at work and my friends, my Bigfoot friends who hate me because I'm repetitive about it. But it's like where you look at a hillside and you see that little pocket of mist coming up. It's like, that's a cold spot. That would be a great place to lay in the summertime. And yeah.
Got to remember where those spots end up being, and you got to mark them on a map and make sure you double back and see if you end up catching anything one early morning or something.
Oh, yeah. I use an app called Hunt Stand, and you can put pins on it everywhere. You can measure distances. It's a fantastic app. But I always mark those spots, and then usually we go in and put trail cams for maybe a month or two, and then we'll go in and start checking it out for ourselves.
Well, I guess before we get too heavy into the Sasquatch stuff, because I definitely want to get into some of your experiences you've had and all the different research and stuff you do. But for anybody that may not be familiar with you, who you are, what you do exactly, why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you get into?
My name is Mike Hartman. I'm a Sasquatch researcher out of Central Ohio, Southeast Central Ohio. I started in 1983 in the third grade. I read a book called On the Track of Bigfoot by John Green, and inside the book was frame 352 of Patty, and that picture burned into my brain because it left me with more questions than answers. There was something missing from that photograph to me, and what that ended up being was information. So I started reading everything I could, and everything that I read growing up was always out west. Out west, it was always California, Washington, Oregon. But as I got older, got into late high school, started thinking about the future, joined the Navy, and then I ended up being stationed in California. So that's when my Bigfoot research really began, because my first stop was Gulfport, Mississippi, which was just across from Texarkana and the infamous Boggy Creek. So I'm running the swamps at night, but I have no idea what I'm doing. I've been deer hunting, coon hunting, muskrat trapping all my life, things like that. But I've never hunted something that I had no clue about. So I'd just go out looking in Mississippi. I ended up in California. In California, I learned that, hey, there was Bigfoot stuff going on in Ohio. I got out of the Navy, came back to Ohio, and yeah, I've been here ever since. I left like 3 or 4 times, and I kept coming back. So I said, that's it, I'm done leaving. And I've just been chasing Bigfoot ever since.
I mean, that legend in Ohio goes back. It just goes under different names. You got to start looking into like the Ohio Grassman, all that stuff. And then you start finding all these like old pings of all this kind of stuff and realize that it's existed in the area the whole time, just went under a different name.
Yeah. Hairy Man, Wild Man were the two infamous, more broad, even United States bound.
Booger, Wood Booger.
Yeah, Booger, Wood Booger, and then the Grassman actually comes from the Great Depression. A lot of people don't know, but the word Grassman comes from the Great Depression. So, yeah, it's where people had farms and they lost their farms, right? So the farms, what happened? Nature took over. So they turned into these big, tall, grassy meadows. And then people started seeing this being walking across these grassy meadows, always in grass. They started finding these grass little nests and huts. Thus came the name Grassman. So, yeah, that all came because he was walking across the hayfield.
That's pretty cool. I didn't actually know that background to that story.
There's one that they say is earlier that was Native American, but I just don't buy it. I'm pretty sure I'm right with the Depression. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, even if the natives were using something like that, assumably it would have been in a different word anyways. So, I mean, the English translation of it, no matter what, assumably probably came around the same time as the Great Depression. But maybe they would have called it like, some variation of Grassman, but in native tongue or something. And then it got translated to English during the Great Depression.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like their word for, at least every tribe is just like different countries. Every tribe has a different word. Like it. I don't think an Apache could hop off his horse and have a conversation with a Cherokee. I think they speak two different tongues. But around here, like the word for owl was wahoo-hoo, and that's just strictly based off of the sound that they made.
I was gonna say that's just strict. It sounds like the sound.
Yeah.
Oh, and I gotta ask too, because you said that you went to California and you're getting into Sasquatch research. Did you end up going to Bluff Creek yourself and checking out that area by chance?
No, I wanted to. I did go back on another trip later in my years, but my first stint out there was spent in a place called the Ojai Mountains, Ojhi. And I didn't even know if it had a history of Bigfoot, but here's some guy in a raggedy old S10 driving around, pulling up to people. Hey, you ever heard of anything, around this area? Big, tall, hairy, walks on two legs. And, of course, some lady would always be cute. Oh, you mean my husband? And it's like, no, But yeah, it actually turned out to be pretty cool out there. And I met a park ranger who busted me stealing pine cones. And yeah, he was really cool about it though, but he gave me some information.
Did he end up leading into anywhere you ended up investigating? Like, just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
did you end up having any experiences or encounters when you're out in California, or did it all kind of start for you in Ohio?
So in California, I'm pretty sure that's where I heard my first vocalization. I was down by a creek. There was a creek coming off a mountainside, and he told me to go start at this creek. That was like my starting pinpoint. And the pine cones, by the way, in my defense, were the size of footballs. I never seen pine cones that big. I just didn't know it was illegal to steal them.
I would have honestly taken them too, because if I find cool stuff like that in nature, I'm known to take it too, just because I find it interesting.
Yeah. And so I went to this creek, and he's like, don't be stealing nothing, but, go to this creek. So I went there, and I sat there for a few nights. And I kept hearing packs of coyotes, and I thought, well, that's got to be what these people are hearing. And then there was just this really weird sound one night. The coyotes weren't out there, but I started hearing owl calls, and then the birds started to quiet as the sun set, and I heard like a fox barking, and then came this just crazy high-pitched, shrill sound. And I was like, I don't think I really need to be here anymore, because it was early into it and I was by myself, and I'm not going to lie, I was like, nope, I'm out. So I got in the truck and I left. So that was my first experience. I got out of there. So yeah.
A lot of people, they'll have that experience where they'll be like, oh God, and they'll just take off out of there and not want to ever come back. Like, it takes a special type of Sasquatch researcher and a special kind of good crazy to be like, all right, I got scared, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to go check that thing out.
That's what it was. It was the whole time I was driving away, I was like beating myself up. Like, you're a chicken turd. You're a, look at you out here driving. You're in the Navy, for God's sake. You just got back from Cuba, but you're going to drive away from something screaming in the woods. You hunted Ohio, and and I'm just laying into myself. And it was like the next weekend, I'm like, all right, I got to go back. I got to know. I have to know. So, and I went back and nothing happened. So, yeah, I should have stayed.
It's that fight or flight and the adrenaline kicks in, because it's like, realistically, you're sitting there and it's like, they always say, a lot of Sasquatch researchers, like, you can't have fear, because as soon as you show fear, it's like they take advantage of it. It's kind of like with other animals. It's like, you can't show that you're the one that's scared, otherwise their hunting instinct kind of kicks in. So you have to like hold your ground. But at the same time though, when you got this thing that's in front of you or is around you that's like 8 to 10 feet tall, and that whatever type of rifle you have more than likely isn't going to do any damage to this thing, it's just going to make it mad, kind of takes on a different feel, because it's like, you can't be scared, but it's like your brain's fighting you in the back of like, you need to run right now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's what I call the Jaws syndrome. Me and Jaws were born the same year. He came out on the big screen, and I don't do the ocean because of that. Now, I've been in the ocean, and I've never been eaten by a great white. But that a Hollywood movie is, and when I was little, my mom brought me into the movie Legend of Boggy Creek, and I watched that guy get thrown through the front door and that hand come through the bathroom. So, that I'm standing in the woods, an adult, with that childhood memory of that movie and that guy getting his butt handed to him. And I'm like, I don't want this for myself. So yeah, I was gone.
I mean, at least the good news is if you run, I feel like it's one of those things we've all kind of established is like no shame, because you've had some like badass hunters that have been out there and they've seen these things and they've taken off and said, I never want to go back to that location. So if you got like these tough guys that are like, nope, I mean, I feel like there's no shame if you do run away. You have to, like I said, be a good special kind of crazy to be like, all right, I like that adrenaline rush. Let's go back and do that again.
Yeah. And it is. It's most definite. If there's any adrenaline seeker out there who's looking for that new high, go chase Bigfoot, because you're going to get that high. When you're in the woods by yourself, no flashlight, and you're hearing crazy noises and you're there on purpose, and you don't run. You you stay right there to see what happens next. That's any adrenaline junkie's just dream right there. So
it's like real danger in nature mixed with like a haunted house, because you don't know what's going to end up emerging from the dark.
yeah. And Hollywood has done a great job at painting our nightmares. The movie Abominable, he pulls that hot college naked girl right through the window and breaks her in half, and then stomps on her head, and her head explodes. And we get that Hollywood version burned into our mind of what, because in Hollywood, Bigfoot's a monster. It's something they can utilize to make money by setting a scene of it attacking and killing people and captivating us. And I think it burns in. I think it does.
We will be right back after this brief commercial break. But just a quick reminder, if you guys want to stay up to date on the show, you guys can always go and follow Inquiries of Our Reality and Open Minds Media on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, YouTube, and TikTok. Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it. I mean, honestly, one of the scariest scenes that I've ever seen in a Sasquatch movie, it doesn't even end up showing it. And usually I'm not a big fan of that whole, like, you don't show the monster and it's more scary thing, because I like being able to see the monster. But Bluff Creek, the movie, that tent scene where they're sitting in the tent and everything's moving around them and they hear all the screaming and throwing and stuff, like, that's realistic of what you would actually experience. And honestly, I feel like that's more horrifying because it feels more real than, like, Sasquatch pulling somebody out of a window and stomping their head or something like that. Like, that's one of those memories that, like, sits in the back of my head where, if I ever end up going out there, I'm in a tent by myself, I'm just going to replay that scene in my head of where they're trying to sit in the middle of the tent and just...
Oh, yeah. And it happens. I mean, I've been in a tent before and heard stuff walking around, and what sucked is that you hear stuff moving. Stuff is moving. And then like 10 minutes later is the gentle drizzle of rain banging off of your tent like a bass drum. And you realize that's all you can hear anymore. So you don't know what's happening right outside your tent now. You did 10 minutes ago, but you don't now, because all you hear is the tap, 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 tap of the raindrops. And yeah, that'll mess with you. That'll get you.
Sit in your tent with a thermo and try to catch these things. I feel like that'd be just as scary too, because then you'd actually know how close they might be to the tent. If you can even pick them up, I guess, because the rain getting wet on them might somewhat kind of block their heat signature a little bit.
And that's highly possible. It's not that hard to throw off a thermal, but at the same time, they are a great tool. I just bought my first one this year, and we're kind of in a romance together. So, yeah, I love it. It's the best tool I've ever owned.
Well, I guess this is a good spot to ask this before we get too much farther into all of your experiences and stuff. Everybody obviously does squatching a little bit different, and everybody has like their own techniques and stuff. Some people like to go out and they, whoop and they knock on stuff. Other people take a totally different tactic and they'll go out there with red lights and not make any kind of noise. Like, what's kind of your like investigation or research tactic? What do you kind of do?
Okay, if I'm going out with just me, it's red predator lights, as quiet as possible. And I built a very specific special audio recorder. So it's a lot of just listening to the woods, but way amplified. Now, if I go out with my best friend Shane Spencer or any of the other guys, we set up a little charcoal grill. We light a fire. We make coffee. Um, and we borrow from things that we've read about online, even if we haven't experienced it. Like a lot of our friends talk about orbs. I've never seen an orb in my life, but we'll take balloons and put glow sticks in them, blow them up, carry them out 30, 40 yards and hang them off a tree limb. So, because, maybe it's an attractant. Just because I have never seen one doesn't mean it wouldn't work. So, yeah, we're always trying different things, just an array of things.
I mean, people like to put stuff out, too, that Sasquatch might be interested in. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if you did something where you're in like a clearing and you put those glow stick balloons out across a couple trees and then just kind of keep an eye on them to see if they move, see if any of them disappear. Because if it's a Sasquatch, I mean, they might honestly get curious and come up and at least like try to tap on it, kind of see what it is. So if you keep your eyes on those things and you see them start moving and stuff, you might know that there might be something over there. Almost like, setting up the perimeter where you use string and put some bells or cans or something on it.
Yeah, we have electronic perimeter detectors that we put around us so we know if anything breaks the beam. But we had one that recently malfunctioned and it was unaware to us. And that's the one that we had put by our balloons, and our balloons was on this wall of brush. So we're sitting there at nighttime, not a breath of wind in the air, and this balloon is just going nuts. And it's like, we're just sitting there watching this balloon go crazy. It's like, did you hear the perimeter alarm? It's like, no, I didn't hear the perimeter. It didn't go off. So you got 18 guys out here with thermals, and we're just looking at a wall of brush that we can't see through. And it's like, does anybody see anything? Like, I've got nothing. And it's like, well, we put that in the wrong spot, didn't we?
It's sitting right on the other side, just poking it with the tip of its finger, but none of you guys could see it.
Yeah, just reaching through, grabbing the tree and just shaking the snot out of it. And we can't even see it. So, yeah.
And just out of curiosity, too, what's kind of like your opinion on Sasquatch? Are you like a flesh and blood type of person? Are you more of like a quantum Bigfoot, like woo-woo kind of Bigfoot? I don't necessarily like calling it woo-woo because I think a lot of it is abilities that we're just not familiar with, but are natural abilities. Yeah. But like, where do you kind of sit in the Bigfoot camp?
When I first started Bigfoot, my background was in wildlife management, wildlife biology. So for it to make sense in my brain, I have to approach as flesh and blood for me to be able to make sense of things. But I'm open to the idea that, because I don't know, I have no idea what's capable of. I'm just because I research them doesn't mean I know a whole lot about them as far as characteristics, behavior patterns, things. So I'm very open-minded, but my approach is flesh and blood, as if I would go after trap a bobcat, a pack of coyotes, go on a deer hunt, something that's my main approach.
See, for me, it's like I entertain all the possibilities because I don't know for sure. And it's definitely like a good thought experiment to think of these different possibilities. But if I had to take like an educated guess for myself, I definitely think that there's something physical, there's something flesh and blood. But I definitely think that they do have abilities that we haven't seen in other places in nature. And that's why we look at them as like weird or woo-woo. Like if they have the lung capacity that they have and they can mimic all these sounds, like, I mean, it would make sense that it's a natural ability, but we're looking at it like it's something that's a little bit more woo-woo, or even like their like possible cloaking abilities. I don't think it's like a literal, like, they can just transform into something else. When people see the like glimmermen things in the woods, I think that's something completely different. But I think like Sasquatch might have some of that ability, like some other animals, where they can kind of like, they have different colors within their hair, and they can kind of do a thing where they like tense their muscles a certain way, and they can kind of like blend in with things. Or, I mean, they might even shed like different animals in nature, and maybe during the winter they're like a lighter brownish color, and during the summer they're like a darkish brownish color. But I definitely entertain the possibility of woo-woo Sasquatch, but where I sit is that I think that they're some type of flesh and blood being, but I do definitely think that there's a huge intelligence factor to them. Whether it's level with us, just below us, or just above us, there's something higher than like most other things in the animal kingdom. Like, we look at ourselves as being like the most like conscious thing in the animal kingdom, but I think that this is like a step either above us or below us. Like, it's got to be somewhere in that intelligence factor. It's not like the mind of an animal, even though it has the mannerisms of an animal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Dr. Grover S. Krantz said that Bigfoot's either one of two things. It's either a very smart ape or a very dumb human, as far as uneducated to our standards, but a master in their environment. And you know, I've watched moose just vanish in a bog in front of me. I've seen deer disappear. A lot of people don't know, but like a grizzly bear or a polar bear, if you put a polar bear under a fluorescent light, they're piss yellow. But on the Arctic with the snow, the light reflects off the snow, and their hair is transparent. So it takes on that white look. But when you remove that sunlight and the snow, a polar bear is kind of like piss yellowish in spots. So,
yeah, I've always found that interesting too, and the fact that they have the hollow hair that kind of helps them keep warm too. I kind of wondered if there might also be something like where people are seeing like the white Sasquatches or something. If it's a matter of maybe they're adapted to a different environment, or maybe it's some type of like albinoism or something like that. But I mean, the intelligence factor to Sasquatch, I definitely think that they're possibly like another like side species that may have started with humans. Because if you look into like the ancestry of humans, and it's like there was a bunch of different type of Homo sapien, or not Homo sapiens, but different like humanoid type beings that were like around. We eventually mixed to create the human race that we are today. But if you were something else that just kind of stayed off in your own areas and you didn't kind of get into this intermeshing of everything, then you kind of exist in this different place. And if people like us kind of took to these like populated city living, all of this kind of stuff, then, you know, we start losing our more hair. We start kind of just adapting into the technological aspect that we are now. Or if you take this like other thing that's kind of going along this different line where it chooses to stay in the woods, it's going to start developing more hair to keep itself warm. It's going to start learning these different abilities like within nature. And I think that they're realistically could be just as intelligent as us, but it's a matter of we deem intelligence to be like being able to read a book, being able to do all this, being able to read. And there's no practical use for that out in the woods. But at the end of the day, these things are better than any survival man that's ever existed. So they're super intelligent, but in a totally different means. And I mean, even within that, it seems like I've even kind of seen where they kind of developed like hunting tactics or almost like war type tactics, because I had this one experience where we like walked through this creek, there wasn't anything there, and then we ended up coming back later on and there was one big footprint across one of our footprints. And I talked to somebody else about it who was in the military, and they mentioned that if you're like stalking somebody, they'll do this thing where you intentionally want the other people to slip up. So you'll start like doing these little tiny things where you start making it so that people kind of get stuck in their head. And that was the closest thing they could relate it to. And I've heard of these things even like, you know, building those little corrals to like get deer and stuff in. So there's an intelligence factor to these things. It's just they've developed to be in the woods where, again, we're developed to be in the city.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my hunting buddies hate me when I say this, but I always tell them that even when we're in the woods, we're dumber than the chipmunk. The chipmunk survives out there year round, any weather, storms, floods, whatever. They only make use of what's around them in a very small area, but yet they thrive. I mean, you see them in hundreds. And so, yeah, I always tell my hunting buddies, you know, when we're out here, we're no smarter than a chipmunk. So, because we probably couldn't do that and survive, you know. We'd have to find a way to make clothes for us. Chipmunk doesn't need a merino wool sweater or whatnot, but yeah, I do in the wintertime. So
I mean, they can even survive getting wet because they're adapted to that. Even if you have the nicest coats and stuff, you get wet in the middle of winter, and more than likely you're going to end up with hypothermia.
Yeah, I got sicker than a dog a couple weeks ago. I was up in Virginia. It did nothing but rain 24/7. My tent got soaked. We woke up wet, we slept wet, we went to bed wet, and yeah, it was just miserable. And not only did I get sick, but apparently it knocked down my immune system enough to where I touched a door handle or something and ended up with COVID. So
Yeah, trench foot and COVID, that's a bad combination.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They made me take 10 days off work. I was quarantined. Yeah, it sucked because I work at a MRDD living facility, so people with developmental disabilities. So if we're sick, we ain't allowed in that building because we don't need that. They have compromised immune systems. So.
So, but at least, hopefully, it was worth it for at least a Squatch. Like, hopefully, you ended up with at least one experience or something from that time you went. Because it always sucks when you end up putting that much effort in, you get soaked, and you don't even end up finding like a footprint or something.
Yeah, that whole trip was a bust. We literally walked away with zero anything. But at the end of the COVID, when I got to feeling better, me and a buddy, because I still had time off because of work, so we spent like 4 days in the woods together. So that paid off. But
hey, at the end of the day, I've said it a million times, man. Half of squatching is just enjoying being in the woods. And if you enjoy being in the woods, even if you don't find nothing, it still ends up being worth the time and you have fun anyways.
Oh yeah, it was worth the trip, even with the rain. I mean, we had fun. We goofed around in the mountains of Virginia for 2 days, so it was fun seeing different territory. And
see, I don't know if you're into like foliage and stuff too, but when I go to different places, it's like I like checking out the foliage itself, because it's like if you just kind of pass over it, everything looks the same. But if you actually like pay attention, you notice that like 20 miles from here, all the trees are a totally different type of tree, or another couple miles from here, like the grass itself and everything that creates the ground is like totally different. So it's like whenever I'm out in the woods, I like taking in all the foliage and just checking out how different the woods actually are. Because if you're not paying attention, they all look the same. But if you pay attention, every single wood you go in is vastly different.
oh yeah, it definitely is. And I have friends who pick on me because I'll be walking through the woods and I'll just try eating different things. I'm like, what this plant tastes like, and that was bitter, so this ought to be okay. That was kind of sweet. That was nice. That's a nice plant. And if it looks iffy, thank God for Google Lens. Hey, this is poisonous, don't eat it, or this is this weed. Okay. So, yeah, and I'm always just eating plants and seeing what they taste like, and people pick on me for that, but I gotta know. So,
hey, I always end up collecting stuff, so it's not any different. I'll be like, that's a cool leaf, I'll collect that. Like you mentioned earlier, that's a cool pine cone, I'll collect that. That's a cool rock, I'll collect that. That's a cool flower, I'll collect that.
oh yeah, my toolbox at work has because I'm maintenance, but it has rocks from Wyoming in it, and there's rocks from Colorado in it. It's like, you actually have tools, or you just use a toolbox to put rocks in? You just worry about yourself and not my rock box. But yeah,
I got enough rock boxes and containers around my house, I promise you that one. And then we always take everything and press it too, so we got a bunch of books with a bunch of pressed leaves and stuff in it too. Like I said, it's half the fun, man. It's just being out in the woods in general. Even if you don't catch nothing, if you enjoy the woods, it doesn't matter.
absolutely. It's just, even if I never did actually get to see a Bigfoot or anything like that, the people I met along the way, the experiences that we've had together in the woods, the shape that it keeps me in, that's all been worth it. So that paid for itself right there.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this commercial break, if anybody is interested in supporting the show or any of the work I do over here, you guys can go and check out the OMM Patreon. Over there is 7-day free trials available for all of the tiers, and it is constantly updating with new shows and different stuff going on. You guys can also go and check out the OMM merch store, constantly getting updated with new designs, not just pertaining to the podcast themselves, but also cryptid, paranormal, and extraterrestrial related designs. And the third way you guys can support the show, if you guys think I deserve it, is that you guys can leave a 5-star review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. And if you guys leave a 5-star review, of course, I will read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. Now let's get to the commercial break so we can hop back in the show. And we are back. So let's hop right in. Diving a little bit back into the experiences too. I mean, a lot of researchers, they never end up actually getting that opportunity to actually like physically see one. Like Alex Petikoff, man, he's like one of the like, you know, biggest, like everybody thinks he's going to be the one that finds it. And he's been on the show a few times and says like, I've had some weird experiences and stuff, but I've never actually gotten to physically see one of these things. And then Seth, you know, Seth Breedlove from Small Town Monsters, he saw one in passing and he was like, man, I got Alex out here who hasn't seen one, and like I don't feel like I deserve that experience because like Alex should have had that. But as far as you go, man, have you had the luck of actually like full blown getting to see these things?
Yes, I've on March 23rd, 24, so 3/23/24, my friend and I went out to Woodbury Wildlife Area, and normally we wouldn't do this, and I don't even think it was planned. It like just worked out this way. But we were looking at this really big brushy thicket, and my buddy Shane Spencer says, I'm going to go through that. And I was like, well, if you're going to go through that, then you're driving it like a deer drive. So I'm going to go up this hill, and I'm going to parallel to where I can see you, but I can also see out ahead of you to see if you flush anything. And he's like, all right, that's a great idea. Let's do that. So he no sooner gets in, he makes it like 10 feet. It is super thick. And he's like, Mike. And I'm like, what? He said, it stinks. And I'm like, pretty thorn and brushy, is it? And he's like, no, it smells like horribly. And I was like, oh, you mean it legit stinks? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, all right. So he's moving, I'm looking, and sure enough, he jumps out 2 deer. And these does start to come out right in front of me, and they start to go up the hill, but then they stop dead. They cut a 90, and they go right back down, right back in front of Shane. And I'm like, well, he just flushed them. That ain't normal behavior. So now Shane's down in the brush, but I'm looking at where the deer turned around, and that's when I caught a hint of movement out of the corner of my eye. And I'm looking, and I can see something, but my brain like won't focus on it. So I grab my camera and I just start click, 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 because I know something's there. And I'm taking pictures, but I really don't know what. And then right in front of a tree, I came up this big, like brownish, reddish brown hair thing, and it moved up the hillside, and then it just went back towards the back into the brush, and was gone. So not only did I get to see that, but I got a really crappy picture of it. But yeah, you can clearly see that it was just this big reddish, brownish hairball. There was no detail because it was probably just at the edge of sight. So in the woods, it was pretty clean up top, but it was brushy down here. So maybe 40, 45 yards, 50 yards. It was right at the end of my viewing range in that woods. But I seen it clear as a bell, and I froze when it turned, because there was one instant where it just turned towards me. And it just stood there, and I seen that classic silhouette shape beside this tree, and I'm like, ooh. And Shane doesn't even know this is happening, because I can't talk. I can't communicate. I have no voice. I can't say, I'm like, Shane, because he can't hear me, and he comes out of the brush, and he's all bloody and bleeding and got thorns stuck in, and I'm like, look at my phone. And he's like, what was that? And I was like, it was right there. And he's like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no. He goes, that was here. And I told him everything that happened, and he's like, no way. And I'm like, yeah, way. That just happened right there.
Was that the first time you ever got to see one?
No, my very first one was at Salt Fork State Park. And now the first time that I seen something, there was literally just a blurry flash in the woods out of the corner of my eye. Didn't make any sound. Okay, maybe it could have been a bird flying through, something like that. But there was just a weird color, brownish flash. But I was at Salt Fork, and we had our little Boston Terrier with us. Her name's Bree. And she was out just running around, and it was dark. And she turns around and she runs right at me, jumps up on my lap, turns around and starts growling at the woods. And I'm looking, I'm kind of like looking, and I don't see anything. But I'm looking up, and there's just nothing there. But she is tuned in and growling. So I lean back and I aim her like a rifle. I look right between her ears, down her snout. And that's when I seen real low to the ground, and I realized I got to quit doing that as a Bigfoot. I was looking at that 6 to 8 foot height, but down on all fours was this big dark shadow just crawling sideways and facing.
Was it doing that spider crawl that a lot of people kind of mention?
It was kind of a crab crawl. It might have been a spider, but at that angle, it was, because its head was up, its butt was down, but it was moving its arms over its knees. But the creepiest part for me was that it like got over to this tree, and then I get the classic peekaboo, and then it goes over to this next tree, and Bree's still tuned in, and I'm getting the left to right peekaboo around the tree, and it goes over towards this brush, and this happened very quickly. But when it got to the brush, it turned broadside, and it was like looking our direction. You could tell by the turn of the shoulders, even though it was dark, but it moved into the brush backwards, butt first. It never took it's like the eyes was the light, the face was, it was watching us that whole time.
Make sure you guys weren't taking off after it. Probably watching the dog specifically.
Yeah, probably watching the dog. And as soon as it got in the brush, now, there was a very, very dim, like one of those yellow pole lights at a state park with the one light bulb that are really crappy parking lot lights.
See like 5 feet in every direction.
Yeah, it doesn't go out very far. But as soon as it got in that dark brush, it just sounded like a 747 crashed in the woods right there. Was just crash, boom, bang, all the way down the hill, and you just heard it go the whole way.
I find it really funny how these things are extremely elusive, but as soon as you spot one, they don't care, and they just take off like a bulldozer through the woods. Like, I've had countless experiences where they'll come up, they'll be creeping up, and the second they're spotted, just no fear, full fear, I guess, just take off and just destroy stuff on the way and not care at all about trying to be quiet anymore.
Yeah, it's like they're mad or upset, like we interrupted them, and they were on a very specific something, and now they can't do it, so they're just taking it out on every branch and tree and rock. And yeah, that's a creepy sound. I'm always glad to hear that sound going away from me and not towards me. So
I'm kind of curious if they might do it as maybe like an alpha type of thing. Like, you spot them when they're trying to creep on you, and then after that, it's kind of like, you're out in the woods and you come up across the bear. You got to do the thing where you're like, you got to act like the bigger one. So I wonder if they do that on purpose to scare you away, not because they're maybe angry. I mean, definitely a possibility, but I wonder if they're doing it just to like show that they're the bigger one. Like, don't come after me because I am bigger and more fierce than you.
And that's absolutely a possibility too. Yeah, I think it's to make us leave and to let us know that we have no business walking in behind them, because they will mess us up if we do. It's like, and they might even be afraid when they're doing it, but it's like, maybe if I do this, they won't want to mess with me, kind of thing. Who knows? But yeah, it's crazy.
Or, I mean, they may even react the same way that, like, you would if you came across an animal or something in the woods. You do that thing where you act bigger, you act tougher, you back up because you don't want to start their chase instinct. And then as soon as you get far enough away that you know that they're not looking at you, which was him keeping that eye contact with you, then you just take off like a bat out of hell at that point. Same way that a person would interact with coming across some type of predator in the woods. Because assumably they see us as the predators,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've all seen those two people get in a fight where the one person starts to get really loud and excited, and usually he's the guy that doesn't want to fight, but he's putting that show on that, you don't want to mess with me, I'll tear you up, and it's like, all right, this guy's nuts. I don't want to mess with him. So yeah.
Trying to do the same thing, man. That's what I would assume at that point. And I was going to mention too, you brought up the thing about always looking down rather than up, because typically people want to look up for these things. And dude, I can completely agree with that, because I've had, again, a bunch of different people come on and talk about their experiences and catching thermo specifically, like when they're camping and they're trying to do the thing where they're watching thermo off in the distance. 99% of the time when people get good thermo from that stuff, they're not standing, they're crawling on the ground up to the campsite, trying to get as close as they can without you seeing them. So even if you're trying to do the thing where you camp out and trying to draw them in, everybody looks around at the trees, but people need to start looking at the ground with the thermo, and some of the best footage I've seen is from that stuff, because they get curious. They're going to come up regardless. It's just a matter of, these things know how to hide. They know that, assumably, we look up. I'm sure that they've probably picked that up by now, so they've probably learned to get down because they know that we're looking up for something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a place where I used to bow hunt, and I was watching this doe walk down through the fence row, and she kept stopping and looking up in the trees. And I found out there was other people that hunted that property. So I went and I looked at those trees, and those trees had markings from where someone had a tree stand in them. And that deer remembered that, and she would look up in every single tree, and someone must have sat close to where I was, because before she got to me, she just stopped and stared right up at me. Now, when I abandoned my tree stand and I would hunt from the ground, I'd have deer all night right there in front of me. But yeah, I would watch them look up in trees, as they were that used to bow hunters on that property and people using tree stands.
Inquiries of All Reality will be back after this brief commercial break, but just a quick reminder, don't forget to go and check out the awesome sponsors of the show: IKNOWSQUATCH, Cryptoteeology, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Oregon-ite, Dimension Devices, and Big Ape Threads. More information and discounts for those are all available down in the show description. Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it. You got to get used to those cycles about how these things pick up on stuff. Because another prime example, like, I've heard of stories where deers have gotten smart enough where they know where there's like the no shooting areas, and they'll specifically stay in there because they know that they'll get fired at if they leave that area. So it's like, assumably, if Sasquatch is intelligent, they pick up on stuff like this. They see patterns, they have recognition, and you got to break that cycle. Because prime example, like the Freeman footage back in the day, the reason I had his son on that kind of explained the backstory to that, and the reason he was actually able to catch that footage is because he always had this normal schedule. He'd always come at the same time, and he thinks that they started picking up on that. So there was one specific day he had to stop and help his daughter with something, and he ended up coming there a couple hours later, and that's how he caught that footage, is because he broke that cycle. So it's like, you got to catch what these things cycles are, where they are in typical areas, and try to catch them off that cycle, because that's seemingly how people end up catching these things, is on accident, because they know where people are, they know where people stay, and they have their own cycle that they stay away and know where to move through certain areas at certain times. So if you mess that up, then yeah, maybe they do partially get mad with some of this stuff.
No, yeah, I mean, it's just like a hiking trail, if you're in a hiking area, we as humans, we're not that hard to find. We leave this beautiful highway right through the middle of the woods where it's just a dirt path, and then you got leaves and grass and moss and on both sides, but we make that perfect trail. We're not that hard of a thing to find in the woods, because general hiking area, we leave hiking trails. We leave a road map literally right to our location. But when you get off that trail, that's when you start to see the fox. That's when you start to see the coyote dens. That's where you start. Is you got to get away from that populace. So,
And
yeah,
assumably these things have gotten pretty smart with that, because typically wherever there's paths, people never see them just mooseying across the path or walking down a path. It's like these things know where the path's at. They creep up to it and then they take off across it. So it seems like these things try to avoid any of that eye contact in that area, because even people that have sightings off on paths, it's usually kind of off in the distance somewhere where it almost seems like they're watching to see if somebody's going to cross through, and when the coast is clear, then they'll take off. Or if you spot them, then they'll just take off straight across the path deep into the other woods on the other side of the path.
That was the craziest non-sighting sighting I ever had. We were at Salt Fork again, and there's a hillside with a road comes down the middle of a hillside, gravel road. So there was a knock on the far left side of the road, and then there was a knock on the right side of the road, and then there was a knock farther down to the right. And it's like, so of course it grabbed our attention, and about that time, an old beat up F-150 came over the hill and down the road. So it's like, did they just tell each other there was a car coming? So, and we're sitting there, and I had my fishing gear out, and we had just cooked dinner, and it just started pouring. It's like, what do you want to do? Do we want to wait it out? See what? You know what? We're already here. We drove the time to get here. We've already ate. Everyone get in your cars. Let's just hang out. Well, it was nonstop rain, and we fell asleep. So my wife fell asleep, my buddy over in his Jeep fell asleep, and I was doing this number because I was fighting it. I was doing the head bob. And down by a creek, I heard like 17 to 21 wood knocks, rapid fire. Just bang, 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 which of course woke all of us up. We're all on edge, our hair's standing up. And I'm looking down the creek, and I'm like, the only thing I can see is fog and a tree and a stump. And I'm like, what the world? So the next morning, rain's gone. We get up. It's like, did y'all hear that? We're brave enough now to get out of our cars and converse. Did you guys hear that? Of course I heard it. That's why I locked my doors. And we got to talking about it, we got to looking around, and we found the tree that we believed the wood knocks were done on, because the back of it was just all scarred up and it was all fresh. There was fresh bark on the ground, and we're walking back to our vehicles, and I stopped and I turned around, and they're like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, where'd the damn stump go? And they're like, what? And I was like, last night when I looked out the window, beside that tree was a stump. Where'd the stump go? So then we walked right back out there, and there was no old stump laying in the creek or anywhere. There was nothing around that tree, but there was so you could see where grass was matted down, where it had been stepped on. But yeah, where'd that stump go? So
that's something I like to talk about all the time, is like, people wonder how these things hide so well. And I always relate it back to, like, you look at a jaguar at a zoo, for example, and it's like, you can see that thing. It's bright, it's colorful, but you put that thing in the woods, and if that thing is standing still in one spot, you're going to walk right past that thing 100 times and not see it. Same with these Sasquatches, man. Everybody thinks they're going to be peeking around the trees, running across the distance. It's like, your eye will catch that sighting. But I think these things have gotten intelligent enough to know that if they stand still and they do not move and they stand next to a tree, they're just going to blend into the average person walking past, and you're not even going to see these things. Where it makes me wonder, like, how many people have had experiences where there's a Sasquatch straight up standing, 30 yards off the path, staring directly at them, standing in between trees, and then they just don't move, and you just walk right past them and not even notice them. Because, assumably the brown, it's like that perfect color where it's like a little bit of discoloration here and there, so it's like in the dark walking past, it's going to literally just look like a tree.
Yeah, if they were the same color as a spotted fawn, I don't think there'd be as many sightings because a spotted fawn is born with 0 scent. Just a regular deer, but we call them a spotted fawn because they got the white spots. But it's that natural breakup camo that breaks up the brown. So when they're laying in the woods, it looks like just leaf litter. But if they're laying in a meadow, it looks like it was flowers, that weed with the big white flower heads that grow in clumps. So, yeah.
And then, I mean, as far as the him banging on the tree went too, I mean, I've kind of had like different theories on what I think the whooping is, which we can definitely get into, and what I think the tree knocking and stuff is. But at least that night, do you think that he was just trying to get you out of the area, so he was maybe just trying to just scare the hell out of you guys and then keep a distance till you guys left, or do you think that there was like a reason why he was doing that other than that?
I think it was you guys need to, because there was a creek right there, and it was a real shallow creek, and it was always full of these really large carp. So I think it was fishing, and we were in its spot. We were interrupting its fishing, is what and it wanted us gone.
See, because the knocking, I know a lot of people think it might be like signaling and stuff like that, but I feel like they might use it to like scatter things, because I'm sure you probably heard about this stuff where they make these like corral looking things they'll try to get like the deer to take off into. So I'm kind of curious if they'll like at night, you'll have like a bunch of deer that are sleeping or something. They'll build up this corral thing. And then as soon as they're ready to ambush, they'll like pound on a tree, scare them all. They'll scatter and then they'll go into that area that they want them to. Like they might use it for hunting. And then as far as like the whoops go, I've always wondered if they use it to signal how many people are in an area. Because I usually ask people when they hear whooping, like how many people were there? And how many times did you hear whoops? And more often than not, they'll say, oh, there was 3 of us. We ended up hearing 3 whoops. Or there was 2 of us. We ended up hearing 2 whoops. So I've been kind of curious if the whoops are to basically say, this is how many people are coming down the path.
That's actually possible. Yeah. I mean, their intelligence, as far as we know, is endless. They have that woods knowledge. So, yeah, that actually makes perfectly good sense to me. So
I'm sure they use it for different things, but I think that might be part of like what people end up hearing, or maybe they have something a little bit different if they hear like a vehicle or something like that come in. Because I mean, you'll hear the thing where they'll do very similar like animal sounds. And I mean, that could definitely be a way for them to be signaling. Or on the other side, I mean, if these things are apes, or, I mean, if they're an intelligent being at all, assumably they need some ways to like entertain themselves. So, you know, if these things have that vocal range, these things might sit around for fun and literally just mimic whatever sounds they're hearing just as a form of entertainment.
Oh, yeah. I was in the middle of nowhere one time, and I kept hearing a car alarm. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And it was one of those stupid mockingbirds. He had heard like those 1980 yeah, that car alarm. And this mockingbird is doing that in the middle of nowhere, middle of the woods. And I'm like, why am I hearing a car alarm? But this dumb little bird was doing that. But yeah, I mean, there was one night, friends Shane Spencer and myself, we were in the woods. Nothing had happened all night. It was a dead night. It's like, let's go home. All right, sure. So we walked a little ways and we stopped to listen. And right where we were, we hear, yoo-hoo. And I was like, what? It's like, did we and we started laughing because it was such a dumb sound to hear in the middle of the woods. And so we just started laughing, and maybe it heard us laughing and it was entertained too. But that was the stupidest sound. Well, the second stupidest sound I've ever heard in the woods.
I mean, if they're intelligent, they may even find this stuff funny like themselves. Because if they have an intelligence factor, assumably they're going to find stuff funny. So I mean, they might just do this stuff to troll humans just because they want to laugh, you know?
Yeah, and that's what the first dumbest sound was I ever heard. We was at a salt fork, Hossack's Cave, and just inside the tree line, we couldn't see in there, but we heard what sounded like Herman Munster laughing. That, that kind of just dumbass Herman Munster laugh, and it's coming from right inside the tree line.
That almost kind of has that samurai chatter feel to it too, if it's that kind of tone.
Yeah, and we laughed at that. We heard that, and here we are, serious badass Bigfooters and whatnot, and we're just in there laughing because we just heard Herman Munster in the woods. So, yeah.
Man, there was one night, man, I was out squatching, and we got all these coyotes starting to start going and stuff like that. But, if you listen to that stuff, sometimes you'll catch some weird stuff on the end. So I've heard of other people experiencing this kind of stuff with, like, owl hoots, with different types of animal sounds. But you'll hear, like, a breakup in the middle where they'll be, like, mimicking a sound, and then they'll have, like, a cough or, like, a throat clear in the middle. So, the last one we heard was, like,
yeah. I have a recording it's on my YouTube, but there's an actual coyote pack, and they blow up, and then maybe halfway into their little yips and yaps, there is a perfect single tree knock, and then these coyotes go ballistic. They just get super excited. They start going off, but right in the middle of their little yips and yaps, you hear this. And then they just go nuts. Yeah.
Like I said, these Sasquatches might be doing it for entertainment too, because I don't know, man, but I find it really fun when I'm in the woods in the middle of the night and I can get some coyotes going. And even on the other side too, it's kind of fun just to at least know how far they are away from where you're at. So, I mean, these things might be doing it for fun too, because, I mean, you have that primal urge. It's fun to just, make coyote sounds with the coyotes,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do. My buddies love it when I start howling, and I just vocal howl. I don't use a call, but I just start howling off into the woods, and then it'll fire up the coyotes, and we love it. It's enjoyable to us. It's entertaining, and yeah, it really is. And when I'm deer hunting, like the other day I was squirrel hunting, and I had this big old 8-point buck in front of me, so I just started grunting, and I couldn't have hunted them if I wanted to. I didn't have the equipment for it, but I'm just sitting there, and he's getting all fired up and hitting, and I'm sitting there recording them with my phone. But yeah, it was entertaining to me to mess with that deer. So
hold that thought. We'll be right back. And we are back. So let's hop right in. Dude, assumably it's the same. It might be exactly the same for Sasquatch. They don't have like recording devices and stuff, but I mean, young Sasquatch, even older Sasquatch, they might be sitting in a spot in the woods. They might have a deer go by and they'll be like, oh, I'm already eating or something. So they might just start going at the deer just to see what the deer's going to do. And to people, they might even just sit off the path for fun and literally just go or make other animal sounds and just see like, how long can we do this before the humans pick up that this isn't an animal? Like, it's just a bunch of juveniles sitting off in the distance making random animal sounds just to see how long it's going to take you to notice.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, absolutely. Because the number one that I hear people talk about is the odd owl call right at evening, where the owls will start talking, and then you get that one owl call that doesn't quite sound like an owl, but it's supposed to sound like an owl, and you're like, okay, either that is a very sick owl, there's something wrong with it, but you have that call, and it's never right there on top of the actual. It's always off in the distance, but
it's like the car doors. They love doing the car door sounds too for whatever reason. Like, yeah, maybe they think it's like a human signal of like I'm leaving or something, or they're just trying to mess with people because they are like, I wonder how long we can make like city sounds or road sounds before these people notice that they're nowhere near a road.
yeah, train whistle, anything. Yeah. I used to have a running list of things that would make a turkey go off, and it was like church bells, car alarms, just a long running list of things that would set off. It's called shot gobbling, and yeah, I think maybe Bigfoot tries to shot gobble us. I really do. I mean, that night when we heard that woo, it's like that was the dumbest sound that could ever come out of the woods and be. Absolutely, we didn't take it seriously because we're too busy laughing. And it was a serious moment that it happened, And it was very odd that that sound just happened to happen in the woods where we just were for hours. Nothing happened. We walk away, and in our exact spot, that sound happened.
They're just trying to prove a point. They're like, here, check it out. Look how close you were.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, we were watching you the whole time. You just didn't know it. So maybe you should lay off the hot dogs and quit talking to each other to actually listen to the woods more. So.
But thanks for leaving us a hot dog.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, it seems like you have like a bunch of experiences. So I definitely would love to have you come back on the show because you got like 30 years of doing this stuff, man. And I feel like every time I bring something up, you have a couple different ones to go with it. So I definitely love to plan to have you come back on and share even more of your stuff. But before we start wrapping up today, if you got like one more of your favorite experiences you'd like to share, I think the listeners would love to hear it.
It was the Woodbury footage that we got. So Shane Spencer and I, we had just dropped money on night vision goggles, night vision monoculars, things like that. We didn't even have thermal yet. And we were at a place called the Bog. Now, I had a sighting at the Bog, and I had a tree pushed over at me at the Bog. So we went back on the 2-year anniversary of that. And we didn't expect anything to happen, but it's just that it was that date. I wanted to know if the area was still active exactly, on an anniversary. So we were there, we're walking down the road, and I'm recording with this night vision monocular, which has like a 2-inch by 2-inch viewfinder. So I don't even know that it happened. And I get home the next day, I plug it into my computer, I'm watching it. And then right as we were walking by was this large, and we went back and did a recreation. We figured out it was 9 feet tall. We did have pictures of eye shine that night, red eye shine, further down the trail. But there was this big black figure, and it just moved behind it. It ducked down at a sliding angle behind a tree, and it was feet away, yards away, and we had no clue until I got home and reviewed that daggum film and seen that thing moving. And we went back with more people, did a full-blown investigation, recreation, found out it was 9 feet tall. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like some of the best stuff you end up finding later on, especially with like the Sasquatch stuff, because sometimes like the paranormal stuff, I feel like there's definitely viable aspects of the paranormal stuff, but also at the same time, the human brain tries to look for faces and things. But when you're out in the woods, you're hunting Sasquatch, and you find direct eyes that are about 8-9 feet up, that's one of those things that it's like, I feel like there's no denying, because it's like, there's definitely eyes there. It's that height. What animals in the woods are going to be standing at that height? That's like some of that undeniable evidence. And it also shows a little bit of what I was saying earlier in the show, that if these things are standing still, you could be walking right past one that could be 10 feet off the trail, and you may not even notice this thing.
Yeah, and especially at nighttime, because we usually only use red lights. If you shine a white light at something, it'll do, that amount. Just like you shine a white light at us at night, and we're going to be like, man, knock it off. But a dim red light, you're not, especially at a distance, you have no reason to squint and look away. So it's going to catch that refraction. So
I use the same thing, to be honest with you, because I feel like it's one of those things too, where the white light, Sasquatch might associate that with like headlights, with something like that. But if you have a red light and they see that off in the distance, either one, if you get into the whole orb theory, they might associate it with an orb, or they might even associate it with somewhat of like a campfire or something like that. So they might be a little bit more curious to come up and check it out. But talk about doubling out, man. I use my red light for one. I'm a fisherman, so I do that thing when it rains where you go out with the red light and you can just collect worms because they don't pick up on that light. But if you hit them with that white light, they all take off into the ground. So red light for getting worms and red light for hunting Sasquatch, or finding Sasquatch. I don't want to say hunting, but
it works.
Mixing it up too, because I feel like it's one of those things where I talked about earlier too, breaking away from the schedule. It's like most people are going out with white lights. So if you come out with a red light, or even if you go out with like a green light, you do something different, and it kind of throws these things off, where anything that might be remotely a primate is going to be a curious animal. So if they're seeing a different color light than they normally do, they're going to be curious. Where, I mean, I'm kind of curious now if somebody like had a white light and they put like the like press and seal that's like different colors and stuff like that. If you started putting like a blue one on it or a green one or whatever, just different colors, if people might end up having luck, because these things might just be curious about what the lights are that are different colors that they'd never seen before.
It's quite possible. Plus, a dim, like a white light is a dead giveaway. A dim red light and a green light actually acts like a shield. In the world of coyote hunting, we call it backlighting. So you sit out so that there's nothing in front of you when you're coyote hunting, and you have your red light in front of you, because if a coyote looks towards it, the light won't hurt its eyes, but it can't see you. But if you have a tree like over here and your red light hitting that tree, then that light will bounce back and illuminate you, and that coyote will see you in a heartbeat, and it's gone. You'll never get that coyote.
So you just got same tactic with Sasquatch, I guess, then kind of create a wall so that they don't know what's behind it, and then also it draws in their curiosity. But you better hope that you don't end up getting surrounded because they're trying to figure out what that light is.
That's a possibility. I mean, we've all been paralleled at some point and had that something walking beside us in the woods where you can't see it, but you hear it, but you're not apt to run in there to see what it is or challenge it. You just kind of hope it turns eventually. So
say, and especially with those ones too, it's like you want to turn your head and look, but you also don't want to like dart it off, because it's that curiosity thing. You're like, is it a squatch? Yeah. Is it some other kind of animal trailing me? But if it's a squatch, I don't want to scare it off. So it's like you do that thing where you kind of just keep beeline walking, but you try not to like turn your head, but you like actively still listen to figure out where it's at.
Yeah, a friend of mine once a newbie, because after a while you get to where you stick around in the woods when you hear those sounds. Well, this guy he was walking and he swore he had something parallel, and so he cut a 90 and went back, and he said it did too. When he turned and went back the other way, he said it stuck right there with him, and he said, man, I didn't know if I should turn around again. I didn't know what I should do at that point. And he was like, what would you do? And I was like, what can you do? You either stand still or keep walking. You ain't gonna fly. You're not gonna grow wings and fly off. So
I feel like you have to keep walking in that scenario, because if you beeline back, then that thing knows that it has the power over you. But if you keep beelining straight, then you're at this like Mexican standoff for a while. So it's like you got to assert your dominance and just keep rolling along, because as soon as you turn around, you gave that thing the power.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hold tight, guys. This is the last break, so stay tuned. And we are back, so let's hop right in. I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, I always like to do words of wisdom from the guests to the listeners. So be it to other Squatch researchers or people just starting off or whatever, but if you could just throw any words of wisdom on the listeners, what might it be?
I would say just paying attention to your surroundings, not giving up, and be persistent. Jane Goodall, for instance, probably knows more about chimpanzees than any other person on the planet, any biologist, any zoologist, because she was persistent. She didn't give up. And be persistent in the woods.
Because it's one of those things. If you go out once, you're never going to catch anything. If you regularly go out to the same spot all the time, there's a lot more of a chance of you actually catching something. And on top of the fact too, if there are things in this area, they might get familiar with the fact that you're coming into this area, you're not destroying the woods, you're not doing anything that seems like you're going to hunt them or hurt them, and then you might end up having some luck where these things actually or get more curious about you, and they'll kind of show themselves off in the distance, just trying to see like how you'll react with it. So if you stay persistent in an area, you might end up kind of developing somewhat of a mutual understanding with these things too.
Yeah, a little bit of a report. We cook the same food. We park in the same spot. We put our fire in the same spot. We sit in the same spot. We're very repetitive. Yeah.
And also, too, you mentioned that you had all these videos, you had pictures and stuff like that. And assumably, too, I'm sure if anybody's in the Ohio area, they've had any sightings. I'm sure you love hearing about that kind of stuff, too, so you got new spots to investigate. If anybody wanted to come and check you out on the internet, they wanted to get in contact with you to share an experience, anything like that, where might people be able to find you on the internet?
On YouTube, it would be Ohio Bigfoot Outdoors. And then I'm on Facebook under the Bigfoot Podcast. So if you're Mike Hartman or Ohio Bigfoot Research at gmail.com. But if you want to listen to some of my recordings, check out my videos. It's YouTube Ohio Bigfoot Outdoors.
And I'll make sure I include those links down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And I really appreciate you making the time to come on today, man. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And we're going to have to set something up soon, man, because I'm sure that you still have a plethora of different experiences. So we're just going to have to keep coming around, man, until we get through this 30 years of all these awesome experiences you had.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm game.
So, yeah, as soon as we wrap up, I'll set up another thing. And to all the listeners out there, expect to hopefully see Mike on the show within the next month or so.
Alrighty.
If you guys enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave those reviews or ratings on iTunes or Spotify. Your opinions go a long way, and I really, really appreciate it. And if anybody would like to get a hold of me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of me through social media, Instagram or Facebook, but Instagram is the one that I'm most active on. Or you guys can go to the submission form, which is available on the link tree. There are two options there, one of which is to contact me, and the other one is to report an encounter. So on the other side, if anybody would like to report an encounter, again, don't forget to do that and report those to ommencounterreports@outlook.com. Or you guys can use the hotline number, which is 313-364-1551. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available on the link tree. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.